So this is a really good example of rising damp, okay? You can see here we've got a smooth brick, which is not damaged, and the same brick on the other side has salt damage, all right? So with rising damp, the water comes from below and goes through the brick. So if you can imagine, this is a complete wall, goes through the brick, and the water comes to the surface. Because the water's been going through the ground and picking up all the minerals, it's got diluted salts in the water. As the water comes up through the brickwork, the water will get drawn to the surface for evaporation, okay? As the water evaporates from the wall, the salts accumulate in the last 5 to 10 millimeters of the substrate. Now normally inside a house you'll have render on there, so the render will be on the front of that, and the evaporation point would be the render. Alright, so this salt accumulation would be in the render there, and as the salt dries in the render, it pushes apart the bonds between the sand and cement. I'm just going to zoom in here, it might not focus really well. So you can see here that pitting there, right? So in comparison to this area here where it's pretty smooth, as we come to the edge, you can see the edge of that brick has damage occurring to it, and the salt crystals crystallizing as the water evaporates is pushing apart the bonds between the sand and cement in that area. Alright, so that's the evaporation point of the surface of the masonry. So when you have rising damp, the reason that you need to take the render off a lot of the time is because if the render is containing salt and you just stop the moisture, so if we did an injection layer here, right, and you stop the rising damp, so there's no more water coming up the wall. If you leave the salt in the substrate above the injection layer, salt is hygroscopic, meaning it attracts moisture from the atmosphere, right? When you've got a lot of rain, the salt will attract the moisture from the atmosphere. The same way your salt gets hard in the kitchen when it rains, it happens to your walls. If you left the render on and you had a lot of salt in that render, it dilutes the salts again that are remaining in your render, even if the injection's been done, okay? And when those salts are reactivated and the rain stops and the atmosphere changes and becomes dry again, that water will evaporate from the surface, and as the water evaporates, the salts crystallize again, okay? So by leaving the render on the wall, if you've got salt damage in the render, the moisture will come in when it rains, activate the salts again. As the moisture evaporates again, the salts will crystallize once again, and then it damages the wall a bit more. Then it rains again, activates the salts, the water evaporates again, the wall gets damaged again. So the same salts will be damaging the wall over and over again because it's a cycle, right? Because if the salts remain in there, because they are hygroscopic, they get reactivated, and then evaporation occurs, and reactivated, and evaporation occurs, and the damage will continue unless you get the salt out of the substrate, okay? That's the reason you would take the render off your walls if you do have a high concentration of salt in the surface.